Cool. So welcome everybody. We're going to talk about high value coaching and what exactly that means and how to bring it to your affiliate or your micro gym business. My name is Zach Forrest. I was told, I'm not really good at this, but I was told that I need to I need to talk about myself a little bit, and I hate doing that. So I've been an affiliate owner since 2008 when we opened up the first affiliate in Las Vegas. It's CrossFit Las Vegas. And since then I've opened up 5 separate locations. I've sold a couple, I've bought a couple, been involved in the building of 5 individual locations. CrossFit Max Effort was probably my most well-known affiliate, and it was definitely highly visited. So I'm sure a couple of you guys that are on this call probably have been to the gym. I also work for CrossFit headquarters. I got on staff in 2010. I've been teaching level 1s and level 2s since then. I'm a level 4 trainer, and I've probably put a couple of you through a level 1 and level 2. And my goal with this seminar, or this webinar really, is to give some information that we would not normally give in a level 1 or a level 2 seminar. Not because it's not good information or because HQ wouldn't support it, but more because it's in line with business. We try to stay away from giving specific business advice because we are more concerned with coaching. And so there is some overlap in the affiliate world, as you all probably understand, between running a sound, consistent business that is serviceable and delivering a high quality of coaching service. So we're going to talk about where those things overlap and how to better impact our members and make sure that the business is benefiting from it. So moving in, the first thing that we need to talk about is labeling high value coaching, because there's this misconception that as long as you are putting someone through a group class and they are relatively safe and they're working out hard, that you are coaching it. And so the first thing that we want to do is make sure that everybody's on the same page with what actually makes high value, or what makes coaching high value. So hopefully everybody can see this. If you can't see something, put in the chat feature or ask a question if you're confused about anything. What it is high value coaching? High value will be relative to the customer. We know that right off the bat. Every customer is going to value different aspects of your business differently. So we want to try and make this as much on our side as possible and relatively objective if we're looking to improve it. It's very hard to improve subjective things, not that it can't be done, but it's easier to improve objective things typically. So it needs to be relative, high value that is, needs to be relative to the customer, and it needs to be relative to what they could get elsewhere for the same price point or below that price point. Meaning they're constantly, either subconsciously or consciously, comparing the service that you give them relative to something else they could be getting, whether or not that's personal training, whether or not that's going to Globo Gym like 24-hour fitness, whether or not that is Orange Theory Fitness, or the affiliate or micro gym that's offering CrossFit style classes down the road. We are going to define high value coaching as the ability to ensure that every member finishes with a feeling of accomplishment and the maximal observable improvement that is feasible for that day. And I realize that might not be the best definition because it's kind of wordy, but it precisely describes what it is that I want you guys to get out of coaching, or what I want you to focus on when coaching. The feeling of accomplishment is going to be subjective, but nobody should leave your gym feeling like they wasted an hour. So I had to come up with a way of saying, nobody should feel like they are wasting their time by spending their money with you. That leads to resentment and frustration, some other things that we'll talk about. Also, and this is the big part, we need to see observable change in people's movement patterns or behaviors while they're at the gym. And this is the part that I think gets missed a lot. It's very easy to make people feel a certain way for some people through personality, charisma, the atmosphere, the vibe, the community, right? But actually changing someone's movement, as you guys probably understand, is a little bit more difficult. for certain types of people. And we want to maximize the positive effect that we have on people's movement. So we're going to go into some specific ways that you can ensure that that happens. What I don't want you guys to think about or think that this is going to be is a regurgitation of the level 2 criteria, but I will be referring to the criteria that we talk about at the level 2, just because it gives us a common language. So I will be talking about those 6 criteria: teaching, seeing, correcting, and then we have group management, presence and attitude, and then demonstration. So before we move on, there was a question, Greg. I assume nobody means as few people as possible. If you mean literally no one, how do you manage people who come in with unreasonable expectations for themselves or for the ways that coaching will impact them? Very good question, and you are correct in your assumption. I'm going to be speaking in some generalized terms for the simple fact that throughout this webinar, I will be giving you guys guidelines. You cannot be a good coach if you deal in absolutes, right? Whenever I say that, it reminds me of Star Wars, like only Siths deal in absolutes, right? So don't be a Sith, be a Jedi when it comes to coaching. There is some gray area, right, Greg? You're going to need to make sure that you take case by case and that you assume that these guidelines that I'm presenting are general population, like wide, broad fit, not every single person. Okay. Hopefully that answers your question. Awesome. So let's go back to that presentation real quick. So what is high value coaching? We got that. This is what it is not. Because I went through this and I was like, you know what? I should be clear. High value coaching is not making people happy or giving them what they want. It's not. It's giving them what they need sometimes. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be focused on giving people what they want sometimes or making people happy, but I don't want people to confuse with, hey, you're a good coach if all your members are happy. I mean, there are certain aspects of your coaching that are probably good, but you can be better, right? So it's not just about making people happy or giving them what they want. High value coaching is not ending or starting class on time. Again, this is something that you may want to see in your affiliate or in your business, where like your coaches are punctual and they are logistically performing correctly. I'm not saying that this isn't important. I'm saying a coach is not bringing high value to the class if they're just starting the class on time and ending the class on time. They're just hitting the whiteboard brief, the general warm up, the specific warm up, the strength or skill if you have that program for the day, the Metcon, and then the cool down. Yeah, they started on time and they ended on time, and look at all that stuff that they got the members to go through during that hour. That doesn't mean they performed high value coaching. That just means they did the bare minimum for their job, right? It's also, not using tools without understanding them, or it's not relying on tools in place of good coaching. The best analogy that I can give for this, and now disclaimer, I have no personal experience with the level method, right? But I appreciate what it is that they're trying to do, in the sense that, and I've read up on it, I just never used it in my gym. I had my own system that was kind of similar to level method, but every system has flaws and shortcomings. And one of the things that I've noticed with gyms or with trainers that rely on the level method is that it has become a replacement for good coaching, for that individual interaction. I know the owners or some of the proprietors of the level method, like they're combating that and they're working on it. But that's just my off the top of the head example. Tools like session plans. I know there's some great companies, Pat Barber over at Warm Up and Workout, they offer session plans. Coaches will rely on that and do it verbatim and think that they are providing high value on the coaching side. Whereas these things are just tools to enhance your ability to provide high value coaching. So I want you guys to understand that, again, the tools aren't bad. Making people happy isn't bad. And starting class on time, ending on time, those aren't bad things. I just don't want you to confuse them with high value coaching. This should be obvious, but I want to make sure we hit this. High value coaching is the hardest thing for a trainer to do, but it is the number one separator for current customers. What that means is it's very, very easy to be organized, to facilitate group exercise and make sure that people have a good time in the gym. You see this all over in franchise models. You see this at gyms where the coaching isn't really relevant. And you can be financially successful just doing those things in the right market with the right financials, like overhead versus income, revenue, and all this other stuff. But it's not high value coaching. And it's very easy for even an untrained or non-acclimated client, someone that has no experience doing CrossFit, it's very easy for them to discern when versus when it is not happening if they have like a compare contrast. So I want you guys to really hone in on this. It is the hardest thing to do, to provide high value coaching. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's not going to be something that you can just flip a switch on. It's going to take some focus. It's going to take some practice. You're going to have to eval your coaches. You're going to have to work with them. But it is the major separator between affiliates when all else is equal. And that should come as like a light bulb for some of you guys, because I see a lot of focus on, hey, we need to streamline business practices. We need our check-in to be streamlined. We need our programming dialed in. We need to make sure that we're offering a ROMWAD session in a proper cool down area over here after every class. And we need to add a smoothie bar. And it's like, if your core service is coaching, that should always be your priority. And it's kind of superfluous when gyms look at what everybody else is doing and they're like, oh, look at all these other gyms. They're adding things that might have value, but are easily seen on the outside, where their core product isn't actually solid. So, and that's being nice. So we're going to go into making sure that our core service is 100% our rock star item. And then when that is happening, we don't give up on it. We continue to improve it, but then we can start looking at other means of improving or bringing value to the business. I just made this a funnel because I kind of like funnels. I kind of broke high value coaching into three categories, three different areas that kind of feed into the next one into the other. It starts with your class structure. This is going to be dictated by programming. Obviously, when I'm talking about class structure, I'm talking about how much time you devote to each element within a session, mainly the whiteboard brief, the general warm-up, the specific warm-up, and the workout itself, and then any cool down that you have afterwards. And there may be more or less elements depending on the programming, and how much time you spend at each element is going to be dictated by the programming, right? But what I want you guys to understand is that the class structure sets the boundaries that allow the coach to do their job. So if you have too much programmed, like you have part A, part B, part C, part D, and then a cash out, the amount of work that coach is going to have to dedicate to brain power, dedicate to group management, making sure that he's keeping everything on time and that people are just being generally safe, is going to take away from his ability to express high value coaching, because there's so many other things that are going to need to take place before he can get there. Otherwise, the class could go an hour and a half. So we're not going to go into a discussion about programming specifically. Maybe I'll save that for another webinar. But take a look at your programming and make sure that you are programming to the lowest denominator on your staff. And this is, I don't want to sound mean. I don't want to sound harsh or callous when I say this, but it's like, if you are giving programming that is very intricate, but you have a new trainer on staff and they can't implement it well, it doesn't matter how intricate the programming was, because it's just a theory until your athletes actually do it. And if they can't implement it correctly because the coach doesn't know how to do that, the efficacy of your program goes away. So it's actually way more effective way more effective. And what I mean by effective is people will get more fit quicker, right? To have very, very simplistic programming with high aptitude coaches rather than very intricate, complex, and very, very nuanced programming with basic coaches. The programming can't make up for it. So something to consider. Coach expertise. This is actually playing into what we just spoke about, right? A coach's expertise is their ability to positively affect change and movement, meaning who actually gets better during the class. We're going to talk about that a lot. And then it also means that each customer gets an individualized prescription from the coach. It does not mean that each person gets scaled. There's a difference there. It means each person gets an individualized prescription for that day, for their goals, and it comes from the person that is leading the class. And we're going to talk about establishing yourself as the expert, as the leader, because that's actually one of the major pillars of building value with a human, is that they have to respect your knowledge, that you know what is best for them. And then it trickles down. If you have a good class structure that allows the coach to express their expertise, right, and it's consistently happening, what you're going to get is relatively high results relative to other offerings at or below your price point. And this goes back to what we originally talked about. The final goal being when your members think, you know what, am I getting a considerable amount of value at the gym that I go to, at the affiliate that I go to, at the group classes that I take at this gym? They're thinking, yeah, how's the community? Yeah, how are the business practices? How clean are the bathrooms? But they're also weighing, whether or not consciously or subconsciously, whether or not they are getting the results that they signed up for, and if they could get it somewhere else cheaper, or at least at the same price. Then we'll also talk about, hey, better movement, less injuries, more progress. Those are the things that I think that a lot of coaches assume is high value coaching. And it's pretty on point, you know, like if your members are making consistent progress, they're moving better, and they're not getting injured very often, if at all, then you're probably doing something right. But again, it's those things relative to the rate at which those things would happen somewhere else. So before we move on, does anybody have any questions about this trickle-down effect or anything that I've said so far? If you do, you can go ahead and type it in Q&A. Because what we're going to do now is we're going to break down each one specifically. Okay, cool. So let's talk about class structure. And like I said, it's dictated by the programming. The amount of tasks that can be completed in a session with high value has more to do with the trainer's ability to teach, see, and correct than anything else. So understand that the amount of programming that you give a trainer to apply or to effectively deliver to your members will be 100% related to their skill in teaching, seeing, and correcting. If you have a relatively novice trainer, or maybe an experienced trainer that just those are their weaknesses, the efficacy of the program is going to go down. So that's what I mean by you need to program not necessarily to the upper or lower end of your membership. You need to take that into consideration, but you need to know what skill level are my coaches, what capacity do they have to deliver this programming. And I recommend programming something that is just barely outside of their reach, meaning it forces them to have to get better. It should not be, if you have a level 1 trainer, they got their level 1, 3 months ago, and they're having trouble teaching, seeing, and correcting a group of 5 people. They have no business coaching back squats like a 5x5 back squat into Fran with a cool down couch stretch. It's too many movement patterns. It's probably too many people for them to actually positively affect change. So make sure that your programming isn't just following some template and you're saying, hey, you're the trainers to your staff, you need to figure out how to do this well. That second point is pretty important. and it goes into like how we're going to measure how to improve this or how to get better at it. Too many elements or movements in the programming, the trainer's just going to facilitate practice rather than direct improvement. So that the difference, just so you guys are aware, is the trainer actually taking time to see faults or identify good movement patterns and then deliver cues and then watch for improvement with those cues. It's something that we talk about the level 2. I'm not going to go too far into that, but that needs to be understood. You need to program, and if you're writing session plans, which I highly recommend, you need to write the session plans, taking into account giving time to trainers based on their skill level to teach, see, and correct. Like there needs to be time built into that and still have time left over for athletes to practice below their intensity threshold. Meaning if you have Fran, because we get this all the time, especially at the level 2, questions about this all the time. You program Fran and people walk in, they're like, is this all we're doing today? Or a workout like Fran, a 21-15-9 couplet. And people are maybe used to like doing a strength, a skill, and then a Metcon every single day. And they're like, what's going on here? If they are not getting practice at kipping pull-ups, like guided practice, coach practice in kipping pull-ups and thrusters, before you ask them to 3, 2, 1, go, throw down, you're doing them a disservice. You are allowing them, you're just facilitating group exercise at that point. So one of the things that we tell people to do is, hey, how much time do you think before you go all out, how much time would you think that you need to practice kipping pull-ups? Or how much time would you like to practice kipping pull-ups before you start going? An experienced CrossFitter probably be like, you know what, I don't need that much practice. I know what I need to properly warm up my shoulders maybe, and I'll probably get like, 3 to 5 reps just to get the movement pattern done. But that's the athlete thinking about non-improvement, because they're linking their improvement to the time, which is a factor. But as far as coaching is concerned, how much time do you think you would need to take with that athlete in order to actually change their movement pattern? If I ask the coach about changing movement patterns, the answers typically become a lot longer. They're like, you know what, I'd probably need to work with that athlete like at least 5-6 minutes before I could actually get them to do something different than what they've been doing. And that's an answer when I ask about changing one athlete. If you have a group of 15 people, how much coaching are you doing if you're not dedicating at least 10 to 12 minutes of pull-up progression practice? Nobody's actually getting better. They're just practicing. And if they're getting better through practice, it's not because the coach did anything. They could have done that at Globo Gym. So make sure there is specifically scheduled time for coaching to take place. This is what I want you to do in your affiliate or at your gym. If you're giving a coaching eval, which hopefully you are, or the head coach is doing that, I want you guys to, you can take a blank piece of paper, or you can make a template, but watch your trainer's ability to teach, see, and correct during a class. Track how much time is spent doing each one of those things, specifically teaching and then the correcting. So what you'll do is you'll write down every single time that the coach goes into teaching mode, quote unquote, where they are presenting information by way of points of performance or progression, right, to the group, you start your timer. As soon as they stop doing that, you stop your timer. Cool, and you do that throughout the hour, and you'll see, or you'll realize how much time they're actually teaching. Now, there's no magic number for this because it really depends on the programming and how many movements and yada, yada, yada. There's a lot of variables that go into that. But you should get a sense at how effective their teaching is versus how much time they're spending. You can spend way too much time teaching, absolutely, and not enough time practicing. You could spend all your time practicing with no teaching and all correcting, right? So there is a balance that you're going to need to strike. And I'm going to trust you to use your intuition as a head coach or an affiliate owner on that. We'll talk about that in a different phone call as well when I break down progressions or teaching. Total number of cues, you can do, if you can manage to do this at the same time that you are timing, then good on you. I couldn't do that. I have to do different classes in order to do that. But basically, how many times does your coach actually deliver one-on-one or to the group a specific cue? Count it. Usually what we like to see is for every minute of training or practice, we get at least 5 Qs in. That's at least 5 Qs. More is better, obviously. Not necessarily more is better. I don't want to say that again. These are guideline terms. Better is better. We know that. Did they spend time with each person on each part of the training session? This is group management when we talk about group management at the level 2. And it's so important that I want to reiterate it here. Group management is less, it is about logistics. It is about timeline control and where you set people up, safety wise, like are their bars going to impede everybody? Did I set everybody to maximize intensity during the workout, yada, yada, yada. It's more so, did the class structure allow me to spend the appropriate amount of time with each person in the class? You have a class of 15 people. This is the analogy that I use at level 2. You have a class of 15 people. You have 5 fire breathers, veterans that have been doing CrossFit for 8 years, right? Whatever. You have 5 people that are like the intermediate level. They've been doing CrossFit for 1 to 3 years. Then you have 5 people that are like beginners, first 3 months of CrossFit. When I ask people at the level 2, I'm like, hey, where should you spend, who's not going to get any attention? They're all like, oh, the fire breathers. They're probably set. I don't need to pay attention to them. Where are you going to spend the most amount of attention? Oh, probably with beginners. I'm like, well, those answers are half correct. 5 Qs during a workout? No, during, so Trina asked the question real quick. What do you mean by 5 Qs? 5 Qs as in 5 Qs for every 1 minute interaction with a person. Like if a coach is with someone for 1 minute, they should be able to, assuming that the person is actually practicing reps, you should be able to get 5 Qs off in a minute. That was a goal that we had for our coaches developing at Max Effort. So, sorry, I kind of got sidetracked there. So you have your 5 fire breathers, your 5 intermediate, your 5 beginners. The answer is you need to spend time with all of them, just differently. So you definitely need to give the beginners their attention because they're still developing mechanics. You need to give your attention to the intermediates because they are probably stuck in the rut. They're probably doing the same scaling that they've been doing for 6 months. That's probably why they're not making progress. They might need a little bit of push on intensity. The fire breathers, these are people that typically already have consistent movement mechanics, not perfect mechanics, so they can still be coached, but they need more emphasis on the intensity aspect. Probably. They might need to be scaled up or scaled down so they can go faster. There's a whole different way that you could attack that. But my point being, are they spending the appropriate amount of time with each person? There should never, ever, ever be an instance in a class where someone goes any aspect of the class and not get coached. That means if you have 10 people in class, all 10 people were coached at some point during the warm-up. All 10 people were coached at some point during the skill development. All 10 people got coached during the workout. It's not like, oh, did I talk to this person during the class? It's, did they get coaching at every single point during the class? Because guess what? If they did a one-on-one, they would get that. And that's your goal. Any questions on class structure or what you can observe or ask your trainers to do in order to maximize their effectiveness with class structure and group management? Awesome. If you guys get any questions, make sure you put those in the Q&A. I'm not actually looking at the chat if that's going. Coach expertise. We're going to talk a little bit here because this is probably the most difficult one to build and to practice. So coach expertise will help our members and establish you as the leader and the expert. And I want to put leader and expert triple bold, triple underline, exclamation point and asterisks around them. That's extremely important. Leaders take ownership for each person under their care. This kind of goes back to what I was just talking about in the sense that the leader, the class leader, the coach, the trainer is going to be making sure that each person gets the amount of time that they need during each segment of the training. But it also, as a broader sense, as a more of a bird's eye view, means that that person's entire session was personalized from start to end. I don't mean like custom tailored, everything about the programming changed. I mean that it was molded for that body, for that person, for that brain and that body. Every single customer should leave your gym or that class setting with observable improvement in their movement or their behavior. And so what that means is if your coach is working with an athlete for anywhere from 5 seconds to a minute, you are going to judge the effectiveness of that coach whether or not something actually changed according to your eyes. Now, if it's behavior is a little bit harder to do that with. I understand that. And there are some days where it's just like, hey, we're going for a mental win today. I completely get that. What I'm speaking to is right now movement, meaning if you have a coach that's just like, hey, get your knees out, awesome job, cool, and then they walk away and they never stuck around to actually make sure that something changed, that's fault number one. Like, they need to stick around and make sure that something changed. But two, did it actually change enough? Meaning if you watch the athlete try to push their knee out and it moves a half inch when you know you could have gotten an inch out of it, and that coach walks away, that's what we talk about relentless, right? That coach walked away from a scenario where they could have built more value, especially if the athlete was being was willing to receive more coaching, right? And I get that some athletes, you kind of have to gauge how hard you push them in the moment. I totally understand that. But your job as a trainer, first and foremost, is on the floor anyway, is to affect positive movement change so you can maximize performance, make sure that they're getting fitter, right? While minimizing risk of injury. So if your coach is not doing that one thing on the floor, they are leaving value on the table. And this is why it's hard to do that, because a coach wants to believe that they are good enough, that they are doing their best. But it's almost one of those things where you might have to correct it in the moment, ideally not in the view of your customers, right? Where you go and be like, hey, why don't you go back there and see if you can get the knee out a little bit further, because that position isn't 100%, right? We can get it better. Like, it's very hard to have a discussion with a coach after the fact and then expect them to implement that like at the next class tomorrow, unless you implement it like in the very next class. So that's why I think a lot of coaches have a hard time improving on this, is because they're not getting immediate feedback on when and how to improve. So it is hard. Going back to that presentation, trainers need to assign scaling and individual prescription. And I don't want you guys to think I'm harping on level method, but again, it's just the most easy analogy for me to me because it's so popular. Don't let someone just choose their own scaling or their own prescription off a chart that's hanging on the wall. Like, you can let that be a guideline, and I'm sure plenty of trainers don't do that, but I've also seen that where they're just like, oh, you're level 3 blue or whatever it is. Go figure it out. And this is what we're doing today. No. One, that defeats your credibility as a coach. It diminishes your credibility as a coach. You should know what they're going to be scaled, and without having to reference a chart, ideally. Like, newer trainers, I understand that. Like, it's a tool. I get that. But I want to make sure that you guys are getting how my relay here. The single best way to build value is by making sure that your coaches are established as the expert and the leader in the community. By doing that, I'm not going to go into something that I thought I was going to go into, but in order to do that, we'll start with that. In order to do that, your coaches need to have a very good understanding of two things: the programming that they're getting, because they need to understand the stimulus. And they also need to understand, or they need to have a good understanding of the bodies that they're working with. So we're not going to have a discussion on continuing education, but if you see a coach struggling to scale people or effectively, or take leadership and saying like, hey, you know what? I want you to use 85, not 75. 75 is too light. Let's go to 85. Or like, hey, you know what? Let's get rid of that green band. I want you going to ring rows today. Oh, coach, I did ring rows last time. Yeah, I want to build some consistency before we go back to vertical pull, all right? So it's like, they need to make decisions, and they need to be able to justify why they made those decisions. They can't be arbitrary, and they can't be superfluous. They can't be just off the top of the head most of the time. The scaling is the biggest way that your coaches will be able to build the rapport and the relationship with members, because that's the definition of it. It is the personalization of the program. So if your coaches are relying on your suggested scales in the session plan, or they're relying on a chart that's hanging on the wall, you're missing a huge opportunity to build relationship, and you're missing a huge opportunity to establish yourself as the expert. And if your coaches don't know, like if they don't have the knowledge base, that's on you. It's partly on them too, but like I always look to the leadership. Is the head coach or is the owner, are they providing opportunities or means for them to get more knowledgeable on these things? So going back to that slide, what I want you to do, if you need to discern whether or not this is an issue at your gym, observe changes in the athlete's movement patterns. This is going to speak to your ability to identify faults as well, right? So you watch a trainer approach an athlete in any scenario in the class, whether it's like they're doing a 5x5 back squat and it's like during one of their reps, one of their sets, or it's in the middle of Fran, like it's in the middle of a Metcon. The trainer goes in and delivers a cue. Did the athlete actually do something different on the successive reps? Was the trainer effective? Did something actually happen? Track how many people in the class actually improved or made forward progress on their movement patterns by the end of the class versus how many didn't. So if you are in a class, if your trainer's leading a class of 15 people, right? And let's say the main movement, we're doing a 5x5 back squat. And of the 15 people, let's say they had good group management and the class structure allowed them ample time with each one of the 15 people. They spent, plenty of time with the beginners, the intermediates, and the advanced athletes, the appropriate amount of time. But only the beginners' movements were the movement patterns that actually changed. Like the intermediate and the advanced athletes, like they're back squatting the same that they've been back squatting. Then you know that trainer has a knowledge cap, or maybe it's an effective cue cap, which means that trainer is only going to be effective for a certain skill level of athlete. I ask this to a lot of coaches. I want you guys to imagine a scenario where you're teaching a foundations class or an on-ramp or whatever you call it at your spot, and someone brand new walks in off the street. They're like, hey, I've never done CrossFit, but I've heard air squatting is good for you. Can you teach me to air squat? And this is someone brand new. And you're like, yeah, I feel like I can teach you to air squat. You take them through the air squat, and it's a train wreck right off the bat. You're like, you know what? Let's sit back in the heels. Let's drive your knees out, lift your chest, below parallel. Awesome. Boom. You improve their air squat. Good job. Different scenario. Matt Fraser, hopefully everybody knows who Matt Fraser is, okay, walks into your gym and says, hey, you know what, coach? Paul, Greg, Trina, one of you guys, I need you to improve my back squat. I would assume that a lot of people would just be like, how? Because is Matt Fraser a perfect mover? No, he's not. It's not that Matt Fraser can't make improvement on his back squat. It's that you wouldn't know what to do with him in order to get him better. So by that sense, what I want you to understand is that your coaches need to be at a level that is always progressive relative to your athletes. Your coach's knowledge base and ability to improve movement needs to be better than or higher than your athlete's current level of movement. If they're not, your athletes are going to eventually leave to go find another coach who is. Especially the people that want to be competitive. Completely different topic. We'll get into that later. All right. So some questions I'm just now seeing. This thing doesn't automatically scroll. Are we supposed to? Oh, no. That's not a question, Greg. Sorry. Paul, would you write the scale mods on the board to achieve this? Some members can assume the option they're going to perform when they can see them. Yeah. So again, that is a form of a tool. If you are generalizing people into certain categories, you are pigeonholing your ability to personalize the program. So if you say, hey, this is the workouts, Fran, here's scaling option 1. It's 15, 12, 9, it's 65, 45 with jumping pull-ups. Here's scaling option 2, and here's scaling option 3. What's happening is you're allowing people to self-select, right? I don't think that is the most effective way. I don't think it's necessarily wrong. I just don't think it's as effective or as efficient as opposed to me going up to Rachel and saying, hey, Rachel, last week, I remember we did a workout with thrusters and it was 10% and you used 65 and that was really hard for you. I want you to go 21 unbroken this time. So we're going to go 45. All right. And I don't want to do jumping pull-ups. I know that's what one of the options on the board is. I don't want to do jumping pull-ups for you because I know it's your engine that's not holding you back. It's your strength. So we're going to do banded strict today. All right. So be careful if you put scales up on the board. What ends up happening is you pigeonhole athletes into it, especially if they self-select, right? Because they're not the experts. Why are you letting them choose their scaling? The coach always needs to direct the scaling. And this is again a different topic. I hate it when people self-scale in the middle of a workout. Like when people decide to take their own weight down, coaches shouldn't let that happen. That means that the athlete is more comfortable making their decision for themselves rather than seeking out the expert who should be you or the coach, whoever the trainer is. So Paul, hopefully that answered your question. If not, tell me where you would like me to elaborate. Going back to my wonderful slideshow. It's captivating, I know. One of the other things that you guys can do I don't know how to go back. Before we get into this, one of the other things that you guys can do is make sure when you're watching the coach deliver the scaling that you are listening in on the scaling. Just stand behind them and you can let everybody know that you're evaluating the class ahead of time so it's not weird. And just make sure that the coach gives a personalized prescription or has a one-on-one discussion with each person in the class for each element. And this becomes way more difficult when you have a strength lift and then a conditioning piece afterwards because the weights that they're using should be personalized. I mean, it can be like, hey, let's go 80%. What's 80% for you? It's 183.7. You know what? I want you to round up. Or, oh, you know what? You looked a little sluggish on that. Let's round down, right? So that interaction needs to happen with every single person for every single element. Now let's talk about results because it's super important. It is. It's the results are relative to wherever your customers could go and still work out. Basically, it's like if someone could go to another place and pay less and get better results or at least the same results, it stands to reason that they will. There are other factors, obviously, community, convenience, but I don't think that people open up a CrossFit gym. And some people I'm sure do, but I truly believe in my heart, and you guys can help me out. I know some of you guys, and you're going to agree with me on this. Nobody opens up a CrossFit gym or becomes a trainer to only be mediocre at helping people get results. I know in your hearts, you want to be the place where people can go, not only have a good time, but really have a major positive impact on their health. So you should not be okay if someone is seeing the same amount of fitness progress with you that they would see at the gym down the street or at Orange Theory Fitness or on their own. I don't think you would be okay with that. And I believe that in my heart. The thing about the CrossFit affiliate though is CrossFit technology is so powerful that even when you implement it poorly, it still works. It's one of the reasons why CrossFit's not fat. It's not going anywhere. And I've had this discussion hundreds of times, but you will see poor coaching still help people. Like people will make progress in their fitness, and that's great. That's phenomenal. It speaks to the efficacy of the program. What I don't like is when you have sound business practices with with poor coaching. And it makes a quote unquote successful affiliate that other coaches now try to emulate. It's not why we went into business. I know a lot of people, you need to make money. It's very important. I'm not gonna say otherwise. We want the business to make money. But what I don't want you to do is focus on making money before helping people. So I've never seen, and this might offend some people, I've never seen really, really good coaches not do financially well. If you're not doing financially well, it does not automatically mean that you are a bad coach. You could just have a misunderstanding of finances or a poor market situation or something like that. But I've never seen someone that is really, really good at coaching in a very, very bad financial situation. I've never seen it. I've seen them not great. But I've never seen them, unless they sign a terrible lease situation or something like that. I've never seen them oh my God, I can't keep members and I'm not growing and I haven't been able to pay rent for the past 2 months. It doesn't happen. Because if you are really, really good at coaching, that's what Greg meant. All the other stuff will eventually fall into place if you care about it. So I know I might get some pushback on that, and I'm more than happy to take some specific questions on individual scenarios, post them in the Q&A. What I want you guys to understand about the results is this is how customers will objectively assign value to you as a trainer or to your coaches. Meaning, if one of their friends be like, hey, you're working out at that gym, what do you think about the trainer? They're going to say something like, oh, you know what? I love my trainer. That's usually the first thing that they say. Not, I love my trainer, but it's something subjective about how they feel towards them. You know that you are doing a really good job when they follow that up with, I've gotten so much stronger. All my lifts have gone up 10 to 15 pounds in the past 3 months. Or, you know what? I've lost 5 pounds in the past month and it's been pure body fat. Or they're really helping. They say something objective that's a performance marker that indicates they recognize your coaching. Not just how you make them feel, but what you've actually done for them. It's how they objectively assign value to you and your coaches as the service provider. And guess what? It's not the programming. It's the implementation and where the rubber meets the road. All too often, I see head coaches not invested fully in developing their coach's ability to teach, see, and correct, and focus within the class structure, and then become the expert, and then get results. They've lost that, and the head coaches just end up focusing on programming or maybe putting out a good session plan with it. And while those two things are important, if your classes aren't filled, if your members are inconsistent, if they're eating like crap and not taking their sleep or recovery seriously because your coaches don't walk the walk, they don't set a good example, your program is not going to matter. If your coaches don't know how to coach the movements that you program, or the warm-ups or the cool-downs, or if they don't know how to teach proper progressions, your program is not going to matter. It's all secondary to those other things. Head coaches should be focused not on the programming, that's a thing that they need to do, but they should be focused on how the coaches are implementing the programming. That is the single biggest factor that I've noticed in professionalism. And I hate using this term, but because I know everybody's going to understand it, a hobby gym, where maybe all of your coaches are just part-timers. They coach 1 or 2 classes a week, and they just show up and they just go through the motions because they don't know any better. I know there are some situations where that's necessary in the early stages, or maybe that you can't figure out how to get out of that. And that's why we have Push Start, is to help you get out of that. But what I'm saying is that scenario is less desirable than having professional coaches on board who do continuing education, and a head coach who develops other trainers into applying a very simple programming model or template extremely effectively. So what can you do if you are in that situation? Keep your programming extremely simple, elegant is what Greg Glassman would say, in couplets and triplets. Go heavy once or twice a week, right? But don't overprogram sessions and spend more time evaluating and developing your coaches, not doing the programming. Something else that if you can afford it, maybe you have a little bit of extra revenue, but maybe you're strapped for time, maybe outsource the programming. There are plenty of companies out there that put forth like simple, elegant programming with session plans, and it's not so that you can do less work. I want you guys to understand that. If you are the head coach and you're getting the programming coming in from somewhere else, awesome. Spend the time that you would spend programming developing your coaches. Don't be like, oh, you know what, now it's a break. No, watch, shadow a class and give them immediate feedback on these things that I'm talking about, how to get better. That's the role of outsourcing something, is so that you can better leverage your time elsewhere, not do less work, hopefully. So let's go back to this real quick. Track results by regularly programming benchmarks, either monthly, quarterly, or I know some people that do annually, like a benchmark month. I don't really care for that tactic, but it works for some people. And compare progress percentages. Bonus points if you can also track non-in-gym performance benchmarks like blood work, body fat percentage, anything like that. Basically, and we talk a little bit about this in the level 2, but basically what I would like you to do is, if you can use a software like Beyond the Whiteboard or SugarWOD, that's fine. It could be as simple as whiteboard tracking, like if everybody's writing their workouts up on the results up on the whiteboard at the end of the day. If they PR'd, they just write it in a different color. And then have your closing coach take a picture of the whiteboard at the end of the day. If you see more blue, because blue was PRs that day, if you see more blue than black, cool, your programming for that stimulus is trending in the right direction. It could be something very, very similar as that. It could be something as complex as Beyond the Whiteboard or SugarWOD analytics. The point here is, if you aren't tracking what you are telling your members that you're going to give them, you don't know if you're actually doing good service delivery. You're a gym, and the reason why most people come to a CrossFit gym, one of the reasons, is so that they can get more fit. If you aren't tracking that, if you're leaving it up to them, which they won't do, let's be honest, we know that the majority of people aren't that. Accountability is one of the things that they need help with. If you're not doing that, you won't know if what you're offering your members is actually working. You might feel like you know, but unless you can show me data, you do not objectively know. So that should be part of the culture and part of the business systems that you are focused on developing as a head coach. How do I know that what I'm doing is actually working for my customers? Every company in the world does, like every successful company in the world does that. There's no reason why you should not do that. So start asking questions, guys, if you want, because we'll go into a Q&A, because in closing, what I want you guys to understand is that high value coaching is kind of like doing an air squat, in the sense that it's very, very simple. We're not going to dive into the complexities of external rotation at the hip from the femur, and like pressure being aligned through the midfoot equally between the ball and the heel of the foot and the archway during the descent and the ascent of the squat, blah, 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 blah. We're not going to talk about that stuff in order to get someone to squat well, right? It's virtuosity in coaching. You need to make sure that the service that you are giving them is rock solid, because if it's rock solid, all the other stuff, your marketing, your business systems and your workflow procedures and retail exchange and checking people in and, whatever it is that you want to talk about, all those other things become not better, but support mechanisms for that experience. So what questions do you guys have? Especially if you have specific questions relative to on the floor coaching, like seeing and correcting situations, or maybe coach development questions. Greg, there are a lot of opinions around whether it's more effective to have part-time coaches or full-time coaches. Do you have an opinion on that? I often feel like I don't have enough time with my part-time coaches to do this time-consuming development that you're talking about. Awesome, I get that all the time. That's almost like saying, hey, I only have time to work out once a week. I feel like CrossFit's not the best thing, but like, should I just do yoga? It's like, no, just do CrossFit once a week is better than no times a week. So real quick to answer that part of your question, any time spent doing development with your part-time coaches is better than no time. If you have part-time coaches that are really passionate about it, maybe once a month you get them together for lunch or something, and you talk about some trends. Maybe you get them all on a mailing list and you send them resources and like homework to read. Like maybe there's like you have a book club kind of thing for like online articles about coaching the squat. Maybe that's what you do for continuing education for your part-time coaches. Something will always be better than nothing in that regard. Now, my opinion regarding full-time versus part-time, it really depends on your business model and what it is that you're trying to achieve. I think that the most effective coaches that I've ever worked with and that I've ever seen in action were people that made it their career. And that's logical. It's like they dedicate more time to their own development. They're typically, I'm not going to say more passionate about it, but their passion comes across a little bit more easily. I think if you want to provide the highest value coaching, you're going to need full-time coaches, meaning your business model should support the career, the financial, professional development of others to make CrossFit coaching their career. I'm not going to get into the specifics of that because that's what we're doing. We're going to do that in Push Start, and that goes outside the scope of this. Part-time coaches, I think, are great, what I call bench players, like build your bench. So like your full-time, if they want to go on vacation or if they have something come up in their life and you want to pull a part-time person in to sub for them, that's fine. I feel like if you have the majority of your coaching staff is part-time, you're going to get watered down effects when it comes to coaching. Not that it can't be good, it's just probably never going to be great. Maybe certain people. Any other questions? Nope. Thanks for asking that, Greg. Oh, you're having a problem with part-time coaches. Actually, that's very common, especially the culture change. I know some of you guys have talked to me about getting part-time coaches. Like you want to start hiring a full-time person and you have to phase a part-time coach out, or maybe a part-time coach is going to become a full-time and it's going to eat into some other part-time coaches' hours, or maybe you're overhauling the coaching system and you bring in like a head coach or a full-timer, or maybe you just want to change the way all the part-timers have been doing their job for the past 2 to 3 years. That's a cultural change. That is a difficult change. It's not easily navigated, but it is something that I have seen successfully done. It's just tricky. Greg, shoot me an email. We can go over that stuff, or hit me up a message on in the app, and we'll go over those things. Any other questions when it comes to high value coaching on the floor? All right, guys. So if you're in Push Start, I'm going to be unlocking some modules this week, and there will be homework posted. If you're not in Push Start, maybe on the next go around, we'll let you guys know when we're opening that up. The only other thing that I want to talk about real quick is that we do have another webinar that Dan is doing. We're going to put the link. Our CEO Dan is doing for how to maximize, I believe, like membership subscription metrics for growth in the fitness industry. So it's basically some KPIs or metrics that you guys could track to make sure that growth is going in the right direction or to maximize growth. We'll put that link in the chat. And just in closing, Steven asked, directing our part-time coaches to Instagram accounts like CrossFit Training, which is back online. Yep, you're happy about that, I'm sure. Whiteboard Daily has really helped on the floor training. Yeah, so Steven, that's a great point. Anything that you can do to passively educate your coaches, passively or actively educate your coaches on training concepts and seeing and correcting specifically, then I'll totally go for it. Like I don't think you can do that enough until your coaches go like, hey, you're bombarding me, I'm not even looking at half of this stuff, right? Then you might have a conversation with that coach, but anything that you guys can put in front of them is going to be better than nothing. I will end with this. John, I'll message you here in a second about Push Start. From coaching level 2s, when it comes to actually coaching, If I said coaches needed help in one area more than anywhere else, it's going to be on seeing and correcting. We get so many people in level twos that still don't know, and these are trainers and affiliate owners that still could not list the 5 points of performance for an air squat. Not only could they not list it, we get some people that can list them all. But then if I say, hey, where would you actually look to see if the posterior chain is engaged on an air squat? They wouldn't be able to tell me where on the body they would actually be able to look. So really, really focus not just on the presence and attitude that your coaches have and their own demonstration and their ability to set the example, but give your coaches more time and more tools on actually identifying faults and making corrections. It's boring. It seems simple, but it has the single biggest impact on a coach's effectiveness on the floor. So I'll leave you guys with that. If you have any other questions, please send me a message. Either email Zach, Z-A-C-H, at pushpress.com, or shoot me a message in the Push Start app. Thanks for coming out. I really appreciate it. Great questions. Talk to you guys soon.